Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another small or short episode on Talk Architecture with your host, Naziaty Mohd Yaacob. This is a food for thought in terms of the topic of critique in architecture or the culture of critique in architecture. So I had a chat with architect Lilian Tay and the other chats that I had with various other people in the last couple of years over in the podcast, outside of the podcast, and obviously among the students of architecture when I was teaching, in which there ought to be a lack of a culture of critique in architecture. What more in our society as a whole? Is the problem to do with how there is a fear that one needs to control everything. So one makes sure that the culture does not allow for criticism. So that is one way of looking at this problem, that it comes from the people who are controlling things for the institution or for themselves, using whatever guidelines or rules or policies or legislation and regulation that is there. 7 years after architect Lilian wrote the article wrote the article in the architecture magazine that is under the Malaysian Institute of Architects. 7 years later, she was vindicated of anything wrong to do with her criticism of a building, because the judge ruled that works of art, design, architecture, there is no law that is there to ban people or to penalize people for their critique. Now, we all know that there is this thing called architecture criticism or architectural criticism, because we learned that in the theory or philosophy of architecture courses. And we do that too with our students' work when we are academics. We critique the work. We invite people from outside to critique the work of students. Then why doesn't this continue, this critique, the culture of criticism, why doesn't this continue to a public discourse, or public forums? Why is it that we are shy or we are reluctant to criticize architecture works? Of course, the main protagonist that I have been working with, Kevin Matlow, has a lot of critique in his lectures or his input, his lecture input, studio input, design critique with the students and with society in general, or the architecture fraternity in general. And people don't want to hear those critiques because they're honest to goodness truth. However raw that critique is, that's the truth. And then you can critique business as well, and then other people will get annoyed at you or would sue you, as in the case of what architect Lillian did. The building owner sued for defamation. So it is a building. It's to do with creativity or some sort of creative expression. Yes, it represents that organization or that company, and they decided to have a building that is ugly or, well, architects are criticizing it from an architectural point of view, but the business or the building owner takes it as an affront or a critique of their company. So where lies the distinction between business and architecture? If we are professional enough in our profession as designers and architects, if we're truly professional about it, we can have a culture of critique, and we can tell others that this is how architecture is. To talk about architecture from giving our points of views on whether the sustainability, the aesthetics, the environment, the structure, construction, the application of the color on the walls and the facades, whether that is good or bad, or in our judgment, because this is the bread and butter of design, to critique. And the conversation should go into critiquing functionality as well. Now, I'm no stranger to this, because as an activist, I get into trouble as well for critiquing on the aspect of accessibility of the design. And I think we should be much more engaging or create a platform for such critique to happen within architecture circle, within the architecture fraternity. And the role of Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia, the Malaysian Institute of Architects, and to extend the architecture education wing of Lembaga Arkitek Malaysia, the Malaysian Board of Architects, would welcome this initiative by people to be critical of what's out there. Because as a bread and butter of the education of an architect, and in a broad-based kind of, that's why I'm thinking that there are reluctance, or there is some reluctance from certain parties that this culture of critique happens. They don't want it to happen because for some reason they can't see the professionalism between architecture critique and businesses. Now, if the developers have a lot of say in policy and how the built environment is created, there was a critique by someone who is a director of a big architecture company, saying about visual diarrhea of the Kuala Lumpur built environment in terms of the urban design, and how we simply build things without consideration for how the impact or how pleasing or not the environment is. That only occurs in the architecture school critique, and even that people are not comfortable with that. Certain people are not comfortable with addressing that. Why not? Our role as an architect is not clear. The purpose of being an architect is not clear in society when we do not have this culture of critique. And we can simply say we are like the doctors of the built environment to people. This is our role. We deal with aesthetics, we deal with environment, a lot of things that we deal with. And businesses should rise up and level up to the point where they are considering the built environment to be better aesthetically, better to live in, more comfortable to live in, and so on. They have to live up to expectations. So thank you very much to listening to this quick podcast episode where there will be a forum or a discourse. We will continue with this discourse, and we'll invite those who had contributed to some of the podcast episode and start having this conversation of the culture of critique and amongst the architecture fraternity, at least, more so in society. Thank you very much.